So in this video I want to speak a little about how I create or find sounds with the 𝗕𝗏𝗀𝘀. And it's kind of the second part of some workflow type video. The first part was more about looping and the whole technical recording setup with Ableton. You can find it here. And this video will be more about sound design. And the video will be related to some small performance videos that I regularly make. If you don't know them, I'm going to link a playlist here because I just make arrangements of some songs I really like and try to play them with the 𝗏 drum, but not only the drum part, but also some bass part and melodies and synth or string parts, which is really fun and just some overall exploration on how far I can get with turning the 𝗏𝗏𝗀𝘀 into some one-man band. Making those workflow videos always tends to be a little messy because it's difficult to really plan them, but always be invited to share any kinds of questions or thoughts in the comments. I'm also just really happy to speak about this topic since I'm also just in the middle of my whole exploration phase. And by the way, if you're new here, my name is 𝗕𝗍𝗀. I regularly post content about music production and performance, and the 𝗏𝗏𝗀𝘀 is one part of it. So if you're interested in content about the 𝗏𝗏𝗀𝘀 or also just electronic drum pad stuff, you're already warmly invited to check out some other videos and consider subscribing. So when I'm working on some new concept for a small performance, I usually start with some empty kit. So in my case, I think I have to look somewhere here in the F30 area. And usually I like to start with drum sounds. And for drum sounds, it's not really some process of creating them from scratch because I always first listen to those individual drum parts. Actually, my kick drum is always here. And if you click on drum select, you actually have some pre-selection of sounds, which is really cool because especially for kick and snare, you have a lot of options. I think it's 20 more, even 24 kick drums and 24 snares. So the chance that there's one that is kind of close to what you're looking for is kind of there. So I actually rather like to start drum sounds this way instead of fully from scratch. And then I just tweak from there. So let's say we have this kick, but I say I want to have a little more decay. I go to the decay section and work on it. This is not the type of sound I would go for, but it's just some example. And play a bit around, because for drum sounds, usually the things that really make an impact on how it sounds are the decay. It's super important. And also the bend section, because you get those drum sounds through something called pitch bend that creates this type of doom, doom type of thing. And if I take it off, you see that we get this kind of drum punch that is really, really cool and what we kind of want for punchy sounds. So those two settings are usually the ones that have the biggest impact on your sound. And then you can also see how much of the sound is tone and noise, because there's a significant part of noise in this case. You see that's actually the kick drum without the noise. And also start to fine-tune it because it has exactly the same decay setting. In this case, it's another decay. It's also sometimes interesting to just see what only the noise sounds like. But basically, you want to add some to increase a little bit the punchiness, because otherwise you just have tone and the noise just makes the sound more cut through, more punchy, more aggression. And the click is also some type of additional noise, which always makes a lot of sense for kick drums. Let's see how... Here it's actually not so audible. Here you can hear it more. It's some additional thing you like to add to make the sound cut through a little more, especially on not so bass heavy speakers. But with this one I realized that you have to be a bit conservative and always make it a bit lower than you think, because then if you think, I can use a lot of it, if you then listen on some, I don't know, on your laptop speakers or on your phone, you're like, oh Jesus, this kick drum is killing me because there's just so much punch. So you have to learn a bit how to use this. And also if I would start the drum sound from scratch, I would usually start, I mean, it's on default on this D section because D is the kind of section of drum resonances. So also on the internal sounds, you see often that the D wavetables were used for drum type sounds. And you can just start by pitching it down for a kick drum, for example, and then adjusting the decay, adding some pitch bend, And now it's already more like a drum, and I didn't even do anything here yet. Then on the left side here, you can also change the kind of wave position of this wavetable. So you can get some more higher notes, for example, or make it duller. And this way you can quickly create your first kind of sound character. Then you can also just try to bring in some noise. And also here, adjust the decay a little bit and see how you can run a tweak it. Here's the filter. If you're interested in more specific explanations of all the buttons, I have a video where I explain really all the buttons of the Nord drum, but this is more about showing you how I quickly refine the sound, which settings I try to focus on. And sometimes what you can also do for drum sounds is play a bit with the drive, because it can, oh actually now the decay is too long. Because now you could, for example, add the drive, and in some decent amounts it just overall rounds the sound up a little. It also glues the different elements together. And yeah, it can give you a kind of cool crunchy kick drum. So usually adding a little bit of drive is also kind of cool, but it really totally depends on your sound. This would be some rather heavy kick drum already. And it would also need some of this click. And yeah, this way you can just quickly design a kick drum, and this is just some random one, but those are the settings I usually look out for. A snare would rely way more on noise, and you can also, which is a great exercise, sometimes analyze a little some sounds that you like. So let's say, and now I have the snare on this pad, doesn't matter. You can always pick the sound and then see what is this. Actually here they were using some different type of waveform. This is like the percussion section. Then you see how much of the pitch, this is a normal pitch, but how much of the pitch bend was, for example, added. Here you see, actually nothing. This right section doesn't matter in this case because the left one is on 0, which is a little weird. Why did they save it this way? I don't know. But you can see how much of all the element is inside. How is the noise generated? You can always mute one part to see what is just the noise, because for snare you really need this noise. And yeah, just get some experience in designing the sounds quickly. But I also recommend to move quickly, because if I usually think too much about sounds, they don't get better after a while. So just go intuitively, take a break, listen again, and tweak over time rather than like having this 1 hour session of tuning a kick drum. I never had a good kick drum after just focusing for 1 hour straight on a kick drum sound. What is really fun on the Nord Drum 3P is to create bass sounds, and I have some more detailed video about how to play bass sounds and lines with the Nord Drum 3P. I try to link it in the upper corner, but in a quick version, you get this typical synth type bass that I often use if you go to the A3 waveform, which is some sawtooth wave, which is this kind of waveform that is often used by analog synthesizers. Then you have to go or pitch it down to go to the bass register. Also finding the notes you want to have. Then adjust the amount of filter, the decay. And quickly you have some bass sound. You can make it more chorusy, 80s like if you increase this knob. At some point you even get intervals, and I'll get to this in a second when it comes to playing harmonies. Because yeah, at some point you can play real intervals, but if you just add a little bit of it, you have some nice chorusy bass sound that can also create quite dark sounds, which is really fun. And you can try out those other waveforms as well, but this is just the one I tend to use the most and is the most practical often. There's no noise in bass sounds. Sometimes if you have a punchy bass, it can be cool to add a little bit, but usually I don't use the noise here at all. What is also fun about those bass sounds is that you can use basically the same setting for some synth parts. And let's go to some kit here, which I was using for the Trans-Europa-Express one from Kraftwerk. Yeah, this one. So first of all, you see that it's panned left, right, which is sometimes handy if you're recording something on one pad, but you see that you can divide it into 2 parts, so you have more flexibility later for mixing, and this is exactly what I was doing here. So that's one thing that is simple, but often helps you a lot. And here you can see I have this type of bass sound on the left side. I realized though for this song I should have made the decay a little longer, but it's just, there's always just something you can find. Let's do it like this. And you can see if I check those types of sounds that you see they are also just a sawtooth wave. What is always helping strings a lot is just one increment of this left value, because like this they sound super dull, and already here you get the chorusing effect. You can of course increase it, but usually I'm happy with just one of them, and then it's the same game. Adjusting the filter, actually with string sounds it depends on the type, so you can have those super quick punchy strings like this, also in working together with a delay. But here I want to have a decay, not delay. Here I want to have some longer decay, but also I don't want to have this strong initial descending movement through the filter envelope, which is why I have this on 0 and just adjust the amount the filter is regularly opened on the left side and get some softer results, so it doesn't sound as punchy. It's difficult generally to have very soft sounds with the Nord-Drum 3P because you don't have attack, so there's always some initial hit somehow, but you can work around a little by just not using the filter envelope so much and just adjusting it then with the value on the left side and the decay. And sometimes you may want to try this setting, but sometimes it dies off very unnaturally. But at least you have the sound for a little longer than with those exponential envelopes. But then in the end, they also descend a little more naturally. Just play around with it. And it's kind of cool if you sometimes can combine two sounds into one section. And here it was exactly 6 pitches with the 𝗕𝗿𝗀𝘀𝘀 song. So I have 5 pads playing the synth pad, which was super cool. And yeah, the sounds by themselves are really simple. And if you're creating pitched sounds, I always recommend that you use this edit all channel function. And in this case, I would start creating the synthesizer sound. Then of course, if you edit all channels, it affects also the one where I have the bass, but I would make this sound later. So first I would look for a synth sound. Just take one pad as your reference pad. Try to set the sound there, and once you're happy, you can just unselect edit all channels and then set the individual pitches for the individual pads. And then later, if you do edit all channels again, you can still edit them all, but they will remain their initial pitch. So you don't have to worry that you will lose settings this way. Also, it's sometimes fun to those string type parts to add some reverb, but the thing with the reverb is if you have it split up in left and right, the reverb is always in stereo, so there might be, or there will be some reverb signal. For example, if I put reverb on my synth pad here, there will be some of the reverb signal on the bass part, and this can mess up your signal a little. So that's why I usually like to add effects in post, although there's also a sound we're going to look at in a second, which is using a lot of reverb. By the way, if you're interested in improving your technique and playing skills with the Nord-Drum 3P, be known that I have a class on some platform called Skillshare, which is just about learning drums with some small electronic drum pads, such as the Nord-Drum 3P. And there's a link down below in the description with which you can try it 1 month for free, no strings attached, you can cancel anytime, and check out if this class could be something for you. So another fun thing to do if you're trying to do some arrangements covering different sorts of sounds is some chord type sound or just some harmonies. And I have also a video which is more detailed on that subject that you can find here. I hope I have enough links, otherwise you'll find it in the description later. But anyways, here also on the Trans-Europa Express one, there was this sound where here, for example, I have a harmony, and here I have kind of a top note. So it's a combination of some kind of robotic sound that has some melodic function supported by some harmonies underneath. Again, I panned it so I have more options later. And here I used this effect that, again, it's just the sawtooth wave, but you see it's at 66, which is the section where you can already play intervals. In this case, a minor third. And so you can play all sorts of intervals in one pad, and you can do it with A3, which is the sawtooth wave, and also A4, which is the square wave. I mean, then you can't use this nice chorusing effect and the sound will sound a little drier. But then again, if you add some other sound like this, you may come up with something cool. And since you can always play two pads at least at the same time, you can actually create up to 4-part harmonies this way. And speaking about robotic, I like those industrial sounds or robotic sounds with the Notdrum 3P, and there's one particular waveform I really like, which is the R2, which is some ring modulated kind of waveform. I used it actually a couple of times already and can really suggest trying it out. You can always fine tune with the overtones, but here it had some nice touch, because you see if you change the pitch, at some parts it sounds very trashy and dirty, but then there's always a part that is really cool, and especially for one note melodies, that's nice, because if you have to play different pitches, then unfortunately it always reacts a little differently with the pitches, because that's how this ring modulation works. But especially if you're just using for one sound, you can really find nice things here. And I think I also added a little of this sample reduction that sometimes makes also sounds that sound too nice just a little dirtier. Because like this, it's like some bell. And here I add some type, it sounds a bit distorted, and basically it reduces the sound quality, but also I get back to this a lot if I feel like my sound is just still sounding too dry. And then there's this reverb thing I just mentioned, because here on the top row I have something that I used for creating some passing train kind of thing, which was really fun. And you can do it by also using a standard waveform. Here I didn't even apply this chorusing thing. It's just basically a sawtooth wave with just a little bit of filter envelope, but not much, and a long decay. I think no bend. And then it's sent into reverb by full amount. So 50 is like full amount, which means the dry signal is completely gone, and you just have only reverb that you hear, because this is the sound without the reverb. I mean, this is a totally plain sound, but sometimes everything you need to do is send it into a reverb. And in this case, I have the plate, and the P, like the higher the number with the plates, I think the longer they are and the dirtier they can sound. So if you soak some very standard sound into a lot of reverb, you can get those nice effects. And also if you play those rolls, you don't hear the individual pitches anymore, which gives you a more floating sound, and also it can then overlap with those other pads. So if you have sounds that get sustained through reverb a lot, you can kind of create chord sounds as well, because they just overlap. I want to show you another sound that I found super cool, which is kind of inspired by some twangy guitar. I was using it on the Blue Monday video. This one. And again, it's this R2 waveform. Here you see that the left value is almost on the bottom, and here it actually worked with the different pitches. That's, where am I? This one. So here are again those kind of ugly overtones. But then here I found this spot where it sounds really nice and just adds this kind of cool twang compared to the basic sound. I mean, it's like some octave lower, but also sounds a little less annoying than just the value on 0. And also, again, I added a little bit of drive, because here it helped again to just round up the sound a little. I just recently started using the drive more, because before I was kind of like, no, I don't like the sound so much. But just for rounding up the sound, it's actually a kind of useful tool. And those melodic sounds almost never have noise. Again, if the sounds would be punchy, I would maybe try adding a little bit of noise, but otherwise this is just the tone section that we're working with. And here it would actually help to have some snappy filter envelopes, so not too short, so you hear the tone, but also if the right amount would be lower, we would have this weird kind of sound, because it goes down so quickly to this amount. But here we have this nice twang that resembles a lot a guitar to me, and was also really fun to play. And also sometimes you may want to try adding a tiny bit of the bend, because here you see it's actually on 1. It's not really easy to hear, but again, this was some example of I wanted to have a little bit of it, but backed off because probably I first had it here. It was too much, messing too much already with the pitch, also in relation to the other sounds already, but a little bit can also be cool for those sounds that need a little bit of attack. But it's a lot of fine-tuning because it can also quickly mess up your sounds. And also here I was using the reverb because there's another reverb setting that is kind of enjoyable, but again, this only makes sense if it's the only sound you record. If you separate, it will be on the other track, and I don't like that so much. But here I only had this sound on this kind of patch. And so you see it's sent into the reverb by 22%, and there's this kind of tiled room setting, which I really like because it's super short. And it just adds almost some type of, not chorusing, but warmth to the sound without sounding too much like reverb, because I can show you without the reverb. Again, it sounds a little dry, but if I turn it in, but you don't really hear the kind of reverb tail in the end of the sound because the reverb is so short, and it just thickens up the sound in some nice way. So if you feel like your sound is a bit too dry, that's also something I can recommend playing with. And one more sound I want to mention is this kind of FX Twin 𝗕𝗿𝗀𝘀𝘀 thing that I did in this 𝗕𝗿𝗀𝘀𝘀 video, this atmospheric type of pad, which I enjoyed a lot, and it's a very dull sound. And actually this was created with D setting, but completely low, because as soon as you add some overtones, am I still here? Yeah. You get a lot of resonances, but if you take them off, you have some super atmospheric, dark sound that is really enjoyable to me. And it even has a lot of filter, but it doesn't even affect the sound so much because the sound is so dull. I think we can actually ignore this because the sound is so dull that the filter doesn't even impact it. And yeah, otherwise just I'm always or often in the 30 area with the decays I see, and not much more. And again, here I was using some reverb. And again, the plates are great if you want to have something more atmospheric, long and dirty. The tiled is like the drive, where you can just make your sound a little rounder. And here I was going for the dirty thing again, also because in this case I only have one sound on one patch. And yeah, this should be it for this video. I hope you got some ideas on how I create sounds. Again, it's always a little spontaneous, and probably I didn't mention something I thought about for 2 weeks that I really want to mention it. But always just share anything in the comments or any questions, because I really gladly speak about it. And as mentioned before, I'm in the middle of my process. So I'm just really about exchanging ideas about this pad and how you can use it. If you're interested in more content about the 𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗀𝘀 3P, I'm going to link a playlist here with a couple of tutorials, and also another one here with a couple of performances so you can see it in action. And apart from that, I just wish you inspiration with whatever it is that you create, and hope to see you soon again at this channel. Bye!